Thank you, guys. Oh, I have to talk into the microphone, right? Thank you, guys. We're so glad to see all of you here. And we're excited to be here, too.
Can I have the clicker?
Yeah. Ready? Please go.
Oh, yeah. Like Jessica said, it works. Thanks to you all guys for coming, and thanks to the Strand for having us, as we're really excited, and to the fine folks at Ivy Press and Princeton Architectural Press, and to Sarah and Gina for coming and making presentations. Tonight we're just going to hurtle through some stuff. We're going to talk briefly about the book, about ourselves and how we all became printers, how Ladies of Letterpress came about, and then how Gina and Sarah will talk about their lives in printing. So, like Michael said, Ladies of Letterpress is dedicated to education. We have about 2,100 members. We'll talk about that more in a minute. And they're from all over the world. And we do all kinds of stuff to further letterpress printing. One of those things is our book. You want to talk about that a little bit, Jessica?
Yeah, sure. Well, Kseniya and I had been thinking about maybe putting together a book. I think we were encouraged by a few of our members as well, but we never really got started on it, and luckily Ivy Press contacted us kind of out of the blue, and we were pretty thrilled that they did. And so this was back in 2013, I think. Mm-hmm. So we started talking to them and talked to a few of our members to just try it out, and we were asked to invite a few members who we thought would really be good representatives of letterpress printing and our community. I think for me, something that I was really interested in creating was a letterpress book that really showcased a variety of types of work that can be created through letterpress. I think there are a lot of people out there who know one type of letterpress or the other and don't realize that it crosses a lot of boundaries, a lot of different lines. So everything from stationery to business cards, but also fine art, book arts, experimental printing. And so I really thought it was important for our book to showcase a nice wide variety of that.
Those spreads will come up in a second.
Yeah.
I meant to switch to this quote earlier. This, I feel like, is the ethos of our book, that there used to be a whole apparatus around letterpress printing and the allied trades. And what's left is a bunch of girls printing. And that's not bad. It's actually amazing. But what lives on from all of that apparatus is people working and putting ink on paper. Here are a few spreads from the book. You can tear these out and put them on your wall. That's what's so cool.
Yeah, I thought that was such a fantastic idea that they approached us with, and we really wanted to run with that because it's not something that we've seen in any other book. And now that I have a copy, I cannot bring myself to actually tear a page out. I'm trying so hard. One of these days, I will get one out.
I know. Exactly. Well, I'll introduce myself briefly, my printing life and how that came about. I own a company, very small, just myself, called Thomas Printers in Pennsylvania, and I'm a commercial printer. I enjoy telling people that I'm a printer when they ask what it is I do. And I'm pretty sure that this is what they think I mean. And as far as I knew before I started printing, this is what printers were. I had no idea. I didn't trouble myself with it until I went to Germany after college, and I learned how to set type and print by hand with this guy. That's Gutenberg. That's me and Gutenberg. And so I learned how to set type in Germany, and as far as I was concerned, that was letterpress printing, setting type by hand one little letter at a time. And that was that. And I came back to the States, and I worked several non-printing jobs. I made printing plates for a printer in Austin, Texas, but all the while I was trying to figure out how to work less at these jobs and print more often. And so I was temping, which seemed like a good compromise. And while I was doing that, I bought my first press, which is a giant 12 by 18 press, which is taller than me and weighs almost 2 tons or 2,000 pounds, one or the other. Anyway, it's heavy. It's really big and heavy, and I kind of figured out how to use it because I didn't know. This, by the way, is my shop currently, which I had built behind my house. Those are 2 of my 3 presses. So while I was figuring this out, I thought that I needed classes and instruction, so I went all over the country picking up skills here and there. I don't need to tell you, but maybe I do, that printing in the past was dominated by men, and their training began with a multi-year apprenticeship. Now, at least letterpress printing has opened up for everyone, but the apprenticeships have disappeared. So, becoming frustrated with trying to patch together a letterpress education, I decided to go for it and figure out printing for myself. I eventually quit temping, acquired 2 more CMPs and a windmill, that's that press in the back, and began printing full-time. I really love to print for myself, and I love to pose technical challenges for myself that need to be figured out on press. This is a 4-color separation, a traditional 4-color separation, I guess, built that goes to build that 4-color or that full-color image down there. And here's the whole project. That was a card with a quote from Cheryl Strayed and then a poem by Seamus Heaney on the back. I did that for a New Year's card 2 years ago. So that was a good challenge for me to figure out how to do that. Or tight 2-color registration, because letterpress can only print 1 color at a time, of course. And a lot of these things I would have been taught had anyone ever, had there been the education available. It was a revelation to learn about printers' marks and crop marks. I don't know, maybe that's an in-joke, but that changed my life. So this was a 18-color job for poet Maxine Kumin. Each one of those little colors means a separate press run. But so focusing on commercial printing means I don't get to print much for myself. That commercial printing means I print for hire, job by job. I could spend a long time telling you what that entails, but someday if I'm back here to talk about my memoir, Printing is Easy and Nothing Ever Goes Wrong, you'll learn all about it then. I just bought that print for my shop, by the way. It's from Keegan Megan in Portland. So printing commercially means making a customer's dreams become reality on paper. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I think in teaching myself how to do this, I've made every mistake in the book and invented plenty of new ones. But doing client work has been the best education for me, even if it does have a steep learning curve, because you only mess up so many wedding invitations before you stop messing up wedding invitations. That's the back of a wedding invitation. I knew when I started printing that I just really liked it, but I didn't necessarily feel that it was my calling. Now I have days when I do and when it's really satisfying, and days when it isn't. Printing has taught me that I'm good with my hands, which I never knew, and good at working with customers, and I'm figuring out the rest as I go. I've started to really care about letterpress in a way that I didn't anticipate I would when I started. I've started to care about ink on paper and realize that it's important to make things in one's life. It's a human impulse to make things. It's in our nature, and if we don't have it, we make it. And Ladies of Letterpress has taught me that it's important to make things with other people, to share knowledge and collaborate in order to keep letterpress printing vital. Now Jessica gets to drive the clicker.
All right. I was wondering, Michael, would you mind turning the screen? I'm just having a hard time looking, and I was wondering if I could just look at the screen on the computer so I know what slide I'm on.
It's not on here.
Oh, it's not
just
on
up
here.
there. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I'll have to turn on. Sorry for turning around a lot.
Do you want to trade me seats?
Yeah, that would be great. That would be helpful. Thanks. All right. So here's in Criminals Press. This is the imprint that I often use for a lot of my book art projects and fine press books. It started with a drawing that I made when I was in school, and it's kind of about, I usually like to say that it's about the good side of us and the bad side of us, and then the fun part of sort of that in-between, the fun part where most of us live, is that funny side in between. This is my brother and me when we were little kids, and obviously we had a bad side. So I actually studied sculpture when I was an undergrad, and what I was really passionate about, and I really thought I would spend the rest of my life doing, was iron casting and bronze casting. I was ready to set up my own foundry, and I was really obsessed with it. It turns out that I'm obsessed with process in general. So when I find something that's very process-oriented, I tend to just dive in completely. While I was studying casting, I also took a workshop in bookbinding, and of course that just, it sent me over the moon. I just really loved it. I was stuck on it. I decided that I was tired after a few years of making blank books, that I needed to learn how to make prints to put in the books, and so I learned how to make prints. Eventually it led me to University of Iowa, where I enrolled in the MFA program in printmaking. And luckily they have this wonderful program called the University Center for the Book. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. At the time it was a graduate studies, certificate in graduate studies in books technology. It is now a full-fledged MFA program, which we're all really, really pleased with. So this is me at the press, kind of playing around with creating imagery, doing a process called pressure printing. So while I was at University of Iowa, I couldn't get enough of letterpress printing, and when school was out in the summertime, this is where you could find me volunteering. This was about an hour away in a little town called Homestead, Iowa, where they had a historic print shop, and on the weekends we would open up, and you can't tell from this shot, but basically I am standing on the blacksmith side of the barn. So it was a barn divided in half with the blacksmith on one side and our little letterpress shop on the other side, and people would wander through, and we would do everything from casting on a linotype, which for me was kind of going full circle there, because suddenly I was back to casting hot metal again, which was really exciting for me. We were casting the type, and we were printing on some equipment that they didn't have at the Center for the Book. So I was really learning a lot more in my summer times here in the print shop. And I think something that really got to me when I was doing this was finding out that one of the joys in printing for me at that point was just expressing myself artistically. But then I started to see these kids come in, and their eyes would just light up just from simply casting their name and printing their own little bookmarks. And it suddenly became like this magical moment, and I felt like, this is a totally different way of really communicating with people and touching people's lives in a way. That their eyes were just, it was really exciting. So if we just sort of fast forward a few years, this is my studio now. From University of Iowa, I graduated and then moved to Asheville, North Carolina. This is actually the basement of my house, and I really love being able to pad downstairs barefoot and a cup of coffee and still in my pajamas sometimes to work in my studio. It's sort of been a dream of mine for a long time, and it's actually happened. So what I have is actually a very small little setup. I'm just going to go through, this is my first press, a little tabletop Kelsey. It's capable of printing postcards and business cards, and I don't really do a lot of printing on it. For me, this is my road press. I take it on the road to do a lot of demos and little workshops and stuff like that. I think Kseniya and I, we each have a Kelsey. We took one to Pyramid Atlantic Book Arts Festival. Yeah, so this is one of our events that we do, or that we've done. This is another press. Is called a show card. It has a larger flatbed. It's better for printing large posters and broadsides. This is a view of my Chandler and Price that I really like, because I just love seeing those curvy spokes. It's just really sexy to me. But something else that's really sexy is that giant print in the background that I printed with a few of my friends. I don't know if you guys have heard of steamroller printing, but when you get this big, you can't fit it through a press, so you actually have to cut a large block of wood, put it on the ground, ink it up, put a piece of paper over it, and then drive a steamroller over it. So that's how we got this large print that says, "Well-behaved women seldom make history." And I just thought that was a really good reminder for me every day when I walk into my studio. So this is the other view of my studio. As you're looking out the French doors, and it's very tempting on days like this, but I have to steel myself and keep plugging away. But it's nice to glance out the window and see how pretty it is outside while I'm working. There are many things that can only be done on certain types of presses, and I don't have all the equipment in my shop, but down the street, not far from where I live, is Asheville Bookworks, which is a community print shop. One of the reasons I moved to Asheville, and what I looked for when I decided where I was going to go, is a community print shop where I could rent time on a press. I basically needed a place where I could print, and I wanted to find other people who were sort of in that same mindset that I could work with and learn from continuously. And so this is one of them. They have a lot of Vandercooks and a couple of platen presses as well as etching presses, and at the time they had a paper making studio too. And this is also one of the places where I teach workshops. I started off just teaching workshops there at Bookworks. Since then, I've started teaching also at Warren Wilson College, and book arts and paper making, and introduction to printmaking at Western Carolina University too. So I'm running around a lot. When I do get a chance to work in my studio, I tend to think of myself more of a fine press printer, and I started off with lithography and intaglio etching, and so I think of letterpress as just a method to a means to what I'm trying to achieve in my artwork. So I create some of these. It's okay to laugh if you want to. So this is my fine press or fine artwork. It's a little series that are supposed to echo children's book illustrations. Oh, and that one's cut off. It says, we'll all be safe if we just go together, or something like that. And the rabbit, I think, is not so convinced. I don't know if you can tell. So I also try to act with a publisher's hat every now and then and publish fine press books. This is a story that was written in Chinese by an author who is based in Hong Kong. It's a do-si-do, which means it's two books bound with together, front and back. And so one side is in Chinese, the original Chinese, and then the back side, it has the English translation. And artist books. I'm kind of obsessed with scrolls right now, so I'm working on crankies and scrolls. And then I also do a few broadsides as well. Why don't you read a few of those? This was in...
You should tell them what a cranky is. It's really interesting.
Oh, do you want to hear what a cranky is? So this is basically a scroll. It's a 25-foot long scroll that was letterpress printed on 15 different sheets of paper and then adhered together. And when I first created the scroll, I thought I wanted it to be like a handmade motion. I wanted it to be slowed down as you move through the scroll. But something about it didn't feel right, and I started doing a little bit more research about it, and I found out about these things called crankies, where you can actually, the wooden sticks at the top, you're actually cranking through it, and they tend to be common with, at least I'm living in Asheville now. I know that this is a part of musicians in the Appalachian Mountains, where they would take someone with a cranky and help tell the story visually of these Appalachian ballads that they were singing. So I'm doing a little bit of research into that and trying to continue in this path right now. It takes a while to crank through 25 feet. You wouldn't think so, but yeah, it takes a little patience. And then this is a recent broadside I just printed for Gabrielle Calvacoresi. All right, so moving into the beginnings of Ladies of Letterpress.
Yeah.
These are, do you want to start with?
You go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so these are just a few snapshots that I took when I went to Oakno Book Fest in Delaware. 2007, was it?
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah.
All right, so this is when I was back in school, and those are me and what we were calling ourselves the Ladies of Letterpress at University of Iowa. For some reason, we don't really know why, but during that time, there was a group of us, I think there were like 8 or 9, there's quite a few, who happened to be in the same class together, moving through, taking letterpress classes together. We're all women, all the teachers were women, so we just started calling ourselves the Ladies of Letterpress. And I'll show you the patch that I made, but I wanted to point out that when I went through my photos afterwards, it might have been like years afterwards, I noticed that there's Kseniya in one of my photographs. This is before I even met her. And there she was, looking at the books.
So it's real.
So this is where, I guess this is where the name came from. I came up with this patch, and it was really just for me and my friends, and just for fun. And Kseniya found it.
Well, I'd been having this idea that there ought to be a group for printers so that it would be easier for them to get their letterpress education than it had been for me. And I don't want to give the impression that I had doors slammed in my face with things. I just found it a real struggle to get good at it, and maybe I wanted to get good too fast. So I just wanted to start this, have a group for people. And I was at Oak Knoll and I saw this patch, and I saw it and I thought, oh God, it already exists. I need and I was like flapping this and someone random found Jessica, and so we talked about it, and she was still in grad school, but she said, let's start, and when I get out of school, then we'll talk.
Yeah.
And so we did. So this is what it looks like now. We have a web presence mostly, or that's where our members interact with each other. Like I said, we have about 2,100 members from all over the world. I think there's a map up. Yeah.
All over.
Yeah, from all over the place. And we're focused on, like I say, education and spreading, I guess, I don't want to say best practices, but that's really it, to help people be the best printers they can be, however that happens, and interacting with the letterpress community, which is kind of already coast to coast, but in little pockets. So we take a group of people to the National Stationery Show as kind of a trade show incubator for people like Gina who want to do trade shows, but not maybe by themselves the first time.
Yeah, so along with encouraging education, we've also noticed that there are a lot of women out there who are learning how to print in order to start their own businesses too. So we wanted to be supportive of them as business owners. So as part of the support, well, for the education we have a scholarship, but then we're thinking that, of this as sort of the support for helping people kickstart their businesses in a way.
Yeah, at least the retail businesses.
Yeah.
We go to book arts fairs ourselves and take our little presses on the road. We went to San Francisco Center for the Book and gave a talk not unlike this one. They welcomed us with chocolate letters. Those were all edible.
That was fun. And then we made an appearance at the LA Printers Fair one year too. So that was fun. Oh, so as a group, we also try to get everyone together to do occasional collaborations. So what you see on display here is not a great picture, I'm sorry, but there is a collaboration of old maid cards. So everybody had a chance to interpret their own old maids. And I think we had, 53 participants, I think, in this collaboration. And then a second collaboration we did was a hello from postcard, basically postcard displaying where you're from, or maybe where you'd like to be from, I think some people mean.
But this work was so good, the quality of it and the variety of it was so good that it was picked up by Vamp and Tramp, fine press booksellers, and it's in various library collections across the country. So this project was organized by Catherine Hunter of Blackbird Letterpress, who is in our book. You can see some of her work in there. So our members just do a bunch of really good work.
I'm just going to
all kinds of it.
Flip through a few.
A lot of it's in the book. Just of all sorts. Yeah, I guess this June is our 4th conference, and it's all hands-on with some hands-on in the afternoon classes and workshops on various things, and then in the morning it's our panels. There's one on letterpress costing, which is how to buy your supplies for a reasonable amount so you can resell them. So panels that help people with their business, and then in the afternoons hands-on things to help them with their skills. Here's the place where it is. Big.
So it's held in what's called Printers Hall in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, which is a part of the old Threshers. Basically, it's like on the state fairgrounds, and there are a lot of warehouses full of giant steam engines. They've just collected steam engines and old farm equipment and train engines. But they have this wonderful place called Printers Hall, where they've also collected a lot of printing equipment, typecasting equipment, and we just can't resist going back because there's just so much to play with there. It's just like a playground for printers. And we try to play with every single toy they have while we're there. And we have a lot of practitioners in the field now that come in and teach in every area, different types of presses, casting. We also have a swap meet and a printers fair. So it's all about not just learning and sharing, but just a lot about camaraderie. We just want to get together and have some fun. Oh, so this is the one that has letterpressconference.com. So if anyone's more interested in finding out a little bit more about the conference, it's letterpressconference.com. I think it got cut off the bottom there.
So that does it for us, and now we'll hear from Gina from Papersheep.
From Papersheep.
Yeah, she's a stationer and entrepreneur, business owner.
So happy to be here. I got my copy of the Big White Book in the mail this week, and I've been like delaying walking away from breakfast with my cup of coffee so I could spend more time just looking at every piece of artwork in there, and just totally blown away by the work. I'm not surprised coming from this group, but still looking at it is like, whoa, it's really inspiring. So my company is called Papersheep, and I do stationery. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey on how I became a lady of letterpress. I moved here to New York 10 years ago from the Midwest, and it was right at the time when film was moving over into digital. So I was teaching photo one students how to process film in the darkroom 1 month, and then getting a job here in New York, moving digital files from one editor's computer to another editor's computer. That was my whole job. So I was, missing school days, but I stuck it out. I got way more exciting duties as a photo editor at the magazine eventually, but still it was a lot of time sitting in front of the computer, and I really missed the hands-on, tactile process of what I learned in school. So I took myself on what I call the self-guided tour of continuing education. And New York has a lot to offer in that regard. I mean, I was making a very small editorial entry-level salary, and I was still able to find so many resources here that just pushed me to try new things, constantly learning. I went to FIT first and took so many classes there. Sewing, drawing, a little bit of fashion design, anything hands-on, you can kind of see the theme I was getting at. Spent a lot of time in the library. I got a book on how to make your own felt from scratch. And I was making felt in my living room with raw wool and hot water, and totally ruining my carpeting. But it was worth it because I loved it. And eventually I found the Arm in Williamsburg. It's not clicking. Oh, it is. So it's a community letterpress studio. You pay by the hour to print there. And you have to take a class to sort of gain entry. So I did the weekend class, and this is the very first thing that I ever printed on the press, and it was with metal type. My class partner and I did this together, and you can see letterpress love. I was hooked from the very first class. The Arm has a great community there too. It was a lot of people that were like me, just kind of self-taught, figuring it out and making their own projects. And you could just be like, Dan, he runs the place, like, why is the press doing this? I was always the one raising my hand and just asking a lot of questions. And I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, teaching yourself, you really need a community, to learn the ins and outs of what was once an apprenticeship. Mm-hmm. But the Arm it was a great place, and I logged a lot of hours, and eventually I started my company. Okay, go for it. All right, so this is a piece of my stationery, and the whole idea behind my stationery is to spread warm feelings. So I start by choosing this ecru colored paper. I don't know if you can see in that photo, but it's not the bright white that you see on a lot of cards. It's really creamy and warm and soft. And so that's one way that I communicate my goal. The other way is by taking all of my design inspiration, or most of my design inspiration, from my own life experiences. So I'll share a few examples. Like this design is actually based on this great first date that I went on We rode bikes to the beach at Coney Island, and the relationship didn't move too much further past that date, but this is one of my best-selling designs, so I think it worked out okay. This one is actually from a solo hike that I went on in Cold Spring. One of the great things about New York is that with $11 and an hour, you can hop on a Grand Central train and be on a trail. And I was going through a breakup. I was just really needing to think through some stuff, and it says up there it all makes sense on the mountain, and it really did all make sense up there that day. So I came back and I made this drawing. I actually went to go see Frank Lloyd Wright's house this weekend with my current boyfriend. We saw Falling Water, and the tour guide told me that he built the house. He insisted that the house be built on top of the waterfall instead of next to it where you could see it, because he really believed that to restore yourself, you need to immerse yourself in nature, and I wholeheartedly agree with that, and that's pretty much what this print is all about. Okay, you can go to the next one. On a happier note, this one is all about my mom. She's from the Midwest and she still lives there, so when she comes to visit, we just have the best time. We run around the city. Oftentimes there's some blonde wigs involved. There's a saying about there's 3 different New Yorks, one for the residents, one for the visitors, and one for the commuters. And especially when my mom's in town, I think the visitors get the best one. So we just have so much fun. So this is just inspired by my mom, her personal style, and like the fun we have together when she comes to visit. This is an example of a piece that I started with a photograph. This big dog was sitting in this little car. This is a real scene I just stumbled upon in Park Slope. And I was just so amazed that this guy was just like sitting there patiently waiting. He could like jump out of that car and he wasn't. So I snapped a photo and worked him in. This is a set of birthday cards and also a tea towel design. Okay. And then this one is, recently I've been really into patterns, and this is coming from my love of Art Deco architecture. My other job, I go to Miami Beach quite a lot to do events, and so I try to jump on those. I think they call them deco bikes. They're kind of like our city bike, and you could just ride around, take in all the architecture. So that's what that one's from. All right, and then so the third way that I communicate the soft, warm feelings that I'm trying to go for is through a palette of like soft, muted colors. It's kind of a joke around the studio how much white ink that I use. I monitor the level in the can like a hawk because I rely on it so much. And you can go to the next one. I really love, though, mixing ink. This is actually a cleanup photo, but you can see how much white ink is in there. There's a very technical way to mix ink using a Pantone swatch book. And it's like a recipe. You have to find the different hues that are coming together to make your specific color, weigh them out in grams, do the ratio math. Math is not my favorite thing, so I do this process when I have to do client work, but if I'm making up something new for the line, I just like to be messy and just mix it up on the plexi, see what looks good at the moment, throw it on the press, make adjustments from there. I'm sure the old school printers are rolling their eyes at me because I work this way, but this is really how I prefer to work. Go to the next one. This is kind of a snapshot, though, of the way I work on the press. I've come a little ways from the setting metal type, but I usually start with a photograph or a drawing, as you saw earlier. This is actually an illustration that I did in Illustrator. Everything gets brought onto the computer and then separated into colors and then sent off to Boxcar. And they make this lovely polymer plate that you see stuck here on the base. Boxcar Press is in Syracuse, New York, and they're so awesome. They answer a lot of questions too. They're so friendly, and they also print. So check them out. But they send me this polymer plate, and so one side is raised with the design, and that's what holds the ink, and then the other side has this adhesive, and I stick that on the base, ink up the press, and align the paper, and as described before, each color gets its own plate, and it gets printed separately. So if I'm doing a 5-color design, I have to line them up perfectly. So there is a lot of like technical measuring, planning, regimented things that go into letterpress. So I really love that I can have that side of things, and then also this like messy organic, just see how it works out kind of process. All right, go on. The other thing I love is texture. So old school printers have this saying that it's kiss the paper. So you can see on the envelope liner, it's like that seafoam ink. It's just the ink that's showing there's like very little impressions, very light. And that was the preferred way. That was the correct way of printing. Nowadays, us ladies, we like to push the envelope a little bit. So the card itself, that's a little corner of a card. It's on this really thick 130-pound paper, and I put a lot of packing into the press, and I just smash the paper and just see how thick of an impression I can get. And so this collection has a bunch of patterns with no ink. It's called blind letterpressing, and it just really celebrates the texture. And through my journey of trying to find this job where I get to be hands-on, and I really love that I get to pass that on to the end user as they have something they can touch and feel. So, and then I started a website, and I started selling these things online. So if you want to see a little more of my work, you can check me out. I'm papersheeponline.com. And thanks for letting me talk about my work. Cool. I think I'll hand off to Sarah.
Hi. So I usually describe myself as a visual artist slash writer slash designer slash illustrator, a bunch of different things. But most of the stuff that I does eventually become something that's letterpress printed. I've been printing for about 12 years now. I learned here in New York at the Center for Book Arts up on 27th Street. I ran the studio programs there for 12 years. It's a community print shop and book arts place where you can take classes and rent space on a press and all that kind of stuff. And so I was sort of immersed in that world for a very long time. And that's where I learned everything I know, pretty much, about letterpress printing. And so most of the stuff I do, I do prints, I do books, I do different kinds of publishing projects, small-scale publishing projects like this one. This is a pamphlet. This is part of a pamphlet series that I do. They're pretty much just a single sheet of paper that's printed on both sides with text and image folded up that you can unfold and read as a little booklet. This one is a pamphlet about the history of cryptography, like writing codes and encoding things and all that kind of stuff. And I really like pamphlets because they're very sort of immediate. They're short pieces of material that you could distribute fairly easily, that people understand fairly quickly. And it was one of the first ways that people sort of shared information and shared knowledge. Historically, beginning of printing, you had pamphlets. So it's sort of my way of bringing things back to the original sort of forms of letterpress printing. Let's see if I'm going to make this work. No? Okay. This is another pamphlet I did. It's called Escape Wheel. It's about different kinds of time and keeping time, so mechanical time, narrative time, navigational time. This one is about Isaac Newton and the sort of scientific revolution. So all of these pamphlets are printed from metal type. So I write out the text, and then I set all the text by hand, letter by letter, word by word, paragraph by paragraph. And they are printed from some metal type that I had cast, especially for the series. The type, it's monotype. So basically, the guy who cast it for me, he typed all the letters into a machine that will cast each letter as individual units, and then I can use those to make those kinds of type forms. And so obviously, like, this is an obsolete form of printing technology, and so a lot of the pamphlets that I've been doing recently have been about, like the history of technology and our relationship to older forms of technology and what they have to do with what we do now. And for me, those two things kind of go together, I guess. It's like an intelligent way of using letterpress for me. Okay. All of the images are usually carved from either wood blocks or linoleum blocks. These are 2 linoleum blocks that I use to print the Time pamphlet. And I try to have my publications be as interesting visually as they are verbally. So there's like a lot of text, but I want them to be sort of striking images as well. So each one of them opens up into a full spread that has sort of like a graphic imagery as well as the information. It's just a way for me of thinking about the history of communication and thinking about the ways that we use technology and the ways we kind of like spread information, I guess. So the way I've distributed them, I usually do them in like editions of 200 at this point. And so what I usually do with them is either I'll give them out at an event, like an open house, or like these ones I printed for an open studio event that I did on Governor's Island, and I would give them out to everybody who came to the event. I also have a mailing list that I send them to, so I would have like a list of people that I had worked with or that I had met through the Center for Book Arts, or I'd come into contact with in some kind of way, and I would send them pamphlets. And they would usually be like a surprise that would just show up in the mail. They didn't know that they were coming, and so they would receive them, and they'd be like, oh, wow, I got this amazing thing in the mail. And it was sort of a way of maintaining a network or developing a network. Sometimes I would send them to people that I didn't know but that I wanted to meet, I guess. And yeah, so it was sort of like an analog way of developing a network of people and of sharing information. So all these things that we talk about on a daily basis, like sharing and networks and all that kind of stuff, it was a very sort of like analog way of doing that kind of thing, right? Through the mail with paper. This year I started doing them as a subscription series, and so people can subscribe to the entire year-long series of pamphlets, and all of the subscribers, instead of me choosing the list of people that would receive them, all of the subscribers can choose a friend of theirs to receive them alongside. So they get one, and then some friend gets a secret special gift as well. I also do things like posters and woodcuts and larger sort of sheets of things. This one is a woodcut poster, and the next one, I think, as well. So these are sort of inspirational posters, I think of them. So sort of like when you're in the dentist and there's like the poster of the cat, just hanging on. So like this is my version of that, I guess. I do a lot of lino cuts. I do a lot of carving of blocks. So these are lino cuts that are printed on different colors of paper and then paper cut through to sort of reveal the different layers of colors, I guess. And they're of obsolete submarines. I also do a lot of work with pattern and found text. So this is part of a series of prints that I did just using found bits of language. We're surrounded by language all the time, right? Signs, billboards, texts, all that kind of stuff. Advertising. That's one. That's another one. It got cut off, but it says my upcoming delinquency. And this is the This is an extinct bird called the kangaroo island emu. He's part of a bigger book project that I'm sort of finishing right now, which is it's a field guide to extinct birds. It's a limited edition book I did in an edition of 25. That's a collection of 30 different extinct birds from around the world. Each page sort of tells the story of each bird and how it disappeared and why it disappeared and different kinds of stories around that. It talks a little bit about the different, ways of that extinction happens. And it talks a little bit about the history of field guides. I got interested in the subject because I was interested. There are some books that do well in the digital age, right? Like big coffee table books. And there's lots of bird books in history that are like that, right? Like large, like Audubon's book would be an example. But field guides, like pocket field guides that you have in your pocket to identify a bird, those aren't doing as well. It's like dictionaries and thesauruses. Those are things that are doing much better as apps, right? So I was thinking about the relationship between obsolescence and extinction, I guess, is how I got started. So anyway, this is a book that talks about all those different kinds of issues. And so he's one of the birds. I think there's a couple more. This guy, spotted green pigeon. That's the cover. I just really like old science books. So that was part of what I was doing. Yep.
Cool. Okay. Are there any questions in the audience?
Anyone has a question, I can bring you a mic for our recording.
This is going to be really basic and astute counsel.
You shouldn't, Derek.
Use the mic. You can hear me. Yes. Oh, okay. Do you with the letterpress, the letters of the ABC, whatever? Do you set them individually? I mean, I remember reading, Gutenberg and
You can.
Caxton and things like that, where
It's one
they sort
option.
of put them and then they press them down and things like that. I mean, is this a silly
Tell them
question?
about it. Sarah.
It's not a silly question. So the way I work with the metal type, yes, I do. But the way,
The way I work is a little more modern.
yeah.
Because I'm making stationery and I'm trying to make a little money on it.
Yeah.
So I need to work a little faster. So that's why the polymer plate came about, was just taking files from the computer, Illustrator files, and turning the digital back into a physical object that you can print on. Setting type takes a while.
It does.
Yeah. And I think I'm in a position where at least a lot of my friends are into, where I have a limited amount of metal type. So I do a combination of both. So if I have the type for what I need, I'll set it by hand. But if I don't, I'll make a digital file and get a plate made of it. So it's kind of nice to be able to play with both methods.
It's really heavy,
Yeah.
but you could, I guess.
If you work in a place that has a large collection of type, like
Yeah.
the place where I print, then you can borrow from the community print shop that you're working in.
They probably won't let you walk out of the building with it, but you
But if
can
you're
work
printing there.
Yeah. But there's also wood type too, which is set individually as well. So there's metal and wood type. That would be both set that
And
way.
then, of course, there's the linotype machine that you key it, like I sit at a keyboard, and it casts what is literally a line of type from one edge to edge of the paragraph. And then you just wind up with lines that you print from. And then you melt them down and make new ones.
Can you use plastic?
Not that way, but that's what photopolymer, that's what she was talking about. And there have been experiments with 3D printing type, but the stuff that I've used isn't. Have you used any yet? Have you guys used any of
I
that?
haven't, no.
It wasn't quite hard enough, and stuff I got
I think it
smashed.
depends on what kind of plastic you use.
Yeah.
There's a
yeah.
wide range.
Yeah.
I think they're doing that at Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU. They're creating a font of type with their 3D printer right now, and they're printing some posters, I think, from it right now as the class. Yeah.
So I guess my question is somewhat related to that. I'm just wondering about the extent to which technology has touched letterpress. So it sounds like maybe it's a little bit of both. In some ways, if you want to, you can do it the same way that's been done hundreds of years ago, but then also there's some new aspects of it that are being developed. Is that accurate?
Well, I will call attention to Jen Farrell of Star Shape Press in Chicago. She uses all metal type all the time, so she is printing more or less the same way we did 100 years ago. But of course, her business is made possible through the internet, and that's the same with mine. I couldn't do what I do where I do it without online technologies. Or without photopolymer plates. I start with a digital file. I can use any of the millions of typefaces available in the world that have been digitized or designed just for computer. And then that's made into film and exposed on these plates. And then I'm left with, after a few more processes, left with a relief surface that I can print on ancient machines. So it's kind of both of these. It's definitely old and new together, which make modern letterpress even viable. Otherwise, it would just, people aren't feeling nostalgic for mimeograph machines, or even offset presses, really.
I think some people are.
Okay, I take that back. I'm sure there's some people are. I kind of love the smell, too. I'm a little nostalgic for them, too, but I don't want one. I don't want Ladies of Mimeograph.
I think also like an organization like Ladies of Letterpress and also other things that I've seen.
Yeah.
I think the only reason, regardless of what you print from, the only reason that we can print today is because of knowledge that is shared among diverse communities across the country and across the world. Because we're talking about equipment that it's obsolete. You can't buy parts for it. There might not be a mechanic anywhere near you that knows anything about this machine. You're really sort of on your own trying to figure out how to maintain these things, how to find supplies that you need, how to use them, all that kind of stuff. So online communities make business models viable, but they also mean that you can actually make the machines work.
And did I understand correctly before that there used to be men of letterpress, but there aren't anymore? Is that?
They're still around. Actually, Ladies of Letterpress has about 80 men of letterpress, too. Anyone can join.
Does anyone else have a question?
I just had a question, New York question. I just did my first stint at the School of Visual Arts in the letterpress department there, and I just loved it. So the ARM is that where you print?
Yeah.
You have your own press?
I've moved on from the ARM because it's an hourly thing, and so, but I spent first 2 years learning there, and I highly recommend it. Dan Morris is the proprietor. He always has a very knowledgeable staff. They're hands-on. They're in there with you, and learning how to not only maintain but also just use the machine. Like, these machines have a lot of quirks. Why does this one side keep getting ink smudge? And they have a lot of shared knowledge there. So I highly recommend.
You have your own press?
Yeah, I actually share a press with another printer because we're not printing 24 hours, but we work it out that way. It's a little more affordable for me, but I highly recommend going there. Yeah.
Do you have any other questions? Oh, one more.
A couple of years ago, we were in Berlin, and we went to the Catholic Allwitz House Museum, and they had all these woodcuts. I think they were woodcuts. Is this similar to that? In the sense of...
Well, I think there are some similarities in that this is a type of relief printing. So when you print from a relief, just like from a woodcut, you're putting ink on top of a surface that's been carved away. And then when you press a sheet of paper against that inked surface, what you're removing is the inked image of whatever stays raised. So that's what relief printing is. And I think of letterpress printing as a type of relief printing because they're also raised surfaces that you're applying ink to.
So like lithographs?
Lithographs are different. Lithographs are planographic, which is one smooth surface that has to do with ink and water repelling each other. So that's actually a different type of printmaking. Yeah. Any of you guys do lithographic printing? It's a whole nother world. Could be.
That's a nice ring.
Actually, men do all of the rest of printing still, so don't worry. That's okay.
Great. Well, that just about does it for tonight's program. On behalf of the Strand, thanks so much to all the panelists for tonight's presentations. They were really, really great. And, I'm sure everyone knows that the Strand is obviously happy that this stuff is still around. We really appreciate it. More copies of the Ladies of Letterpress are available at the back of the room for purchase. If anyone hasn't picked up a copy yet, it's a really, really beautiful, book. I'm sure anyone would love to have one. And yeah, thanks all everyone for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.